Okay, what is ancestral healing? If I was going to simplify this for people, I would have them think about the fact that they are the continuation of their ancestors. We don't think about ourselves this way. Most of the time, even those of us that are in the spiritual field, we think of ourselves as like these non-physical beings that come into a meat suit, and that's really the story. But the story is much more complex than that. Before you're coming into this time-space reality, you're opting into the consciousness of your family lines, right? And what you're essentially saying is, I'm going to arrange kind of a contract here whereby I bring my soul stream energy down to become the continuation of that family consciousness, right? So what will happen when you do that is there are vibrational frequencies that are active still from whatever happened or whenever their origin was in your family line. And it's really up to you what to do with those, because like some of those patterns and some of those frequencies are beneficial and some of them are detrimental. So it's really about the work of really owning those beneficial aspects and expressing them and altering and changing those detrimental patterns that are running through your family line. Mm-hmm. It's just most of us don't really recognize these frequencies or these patterns. We don't understand where they came from. They're just active in us and we identify with them as our personality. So yeah, there's the big thing that we have to hurdle first when it comes to ancestral trauma is that most people don't even recognize that they're carrying on their ancestry. Everyone. Doesn't matter who you are.
Yeah.
So how do you know if something is ancestral trauma or if it's just trauma from your lifetime that you maybe don't exactly remember?
I can't give you an exact answer for that one.
Yeah.
Because so often, I mean, it's not like there's a telltale that this has been going on forever, which is why it's much more beneficial, when I'm speaking to a person of, let's say, not that doesn't have the capacity to say get into these other dimensions and therefore see, that something is an ancestral trauma. It's more beneficial to tell a person to work with whatever is coming up, right? Because whatever is coming up in you in your personal life most likely relates to ancestry. You're just not aware of it, right? So it's almost like the more the merrier, the more information the merrier. So you start from whatever comes up, I'm doing ancestral healing. And if I know that it relates to ancestry, that's just a huge plus because it means that I've got more information at my disposal for how to deal with it.
Yeah. So do you have to know your ancestors to understand your ancestral trauma, or do you just have to know the patterns? Because my father was adopted, like if I went up the line, I wouldn't actually be able to go too far up the line.
Yet.
Oh.
Why I say yet is there's this huge universal push towards the owning of our ancestry and the changing of these patterns. In fact, the progress and the outcome of the human race depends a lot upon our capacity to change these ancestral patterns that have continued to repeat generation after generation. And with this kind of an ancestral push, you're going to see far more capacity to access ancestry, and not even in esoteric ways and scientific ways than people ever thought possible. I mean, you even see this now with genetic research, right? Genetic research is pushing ancestry to a whole new place. I mean, now it's going to be that they can identify who you're related to just by your genome. It doesn't matter whether they knew. As we're seeing with all this fun stuff coming out where people are like, what? I don't have the same genome as my dad? That's not my dad. There's all this family drama happening around this movement, but it's going to open the door for a lot of people as well who are in your position. But what I want to say is that if you know nothing about your ancestry, you're adopted, whatever it is, you don't have to panic that you're never going to be able to do ancestral healing. Why? Because you are the progression of your family line. You don't even need to come into contact with your birth parents ever to carry on the stuff that is active within them. We can get into that more later because that gets complicated and awesome and juicy. But if you work with whatever arises, you are most likely doing ancestral work. You're just not aware of it, right? What I want people to treat this like is like the more the better. When you start picking at whatever information you do have, and like even somebody who's adopted has no awareness of their ancestry. Let's say they decide to do a DNA test and it's like, you have all the Scandinavian in you, right? Even that opens the door for us to study, Scandinavian people, Scandinavian history, patterns, social patterns. to start to recognize things that might be still in us from this. Affinities, preferences, aversions. I mean, the list is 5 miles long. So you'd be surprised, and the average person is surprised when they really start to go down this rabbit hole of research, just how much a tiny thread can give you. You know? And we all have threads, whether we're aware of it or not. We all have threads. Even if we want to just walk down the racial train, we have threads.
Yes. It makes me think about what personality is, because we try to determine who we are. What is your take on who we manifest as, what our personality is, and what the pieces are that go into that, and how it's formed?
It's best to think about personality like a stained glass window. You know how there are all these different angles and filaments to it, right? Or like a mosaic. There are so many pieces that come from so many places that what we call our personality is the amalgamation of those things. It's the amalgamation of adaptive strategies that kept us safe in childhood. It's things that we came into, like preferences and aversions from, our ancestry that we adopted. It's from ways that we decided to change ourselves because we got into consciousness work. I mean, it's a very elaborate, multifaceted tapestry. And we're calling the amalgamation of those things a personality structure. But it's a whole system.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm somebody who hit rock bottom like 10 years ago. And they had me look at, I went through this fellowship. They had me look at all my resentments and figure out where I was selfish, look at all my fears, figure out where, I was selfish, look at my horrible sex conduct, all that stuff. And
I think they said that as a joke.
But anyway, yeah. So we got to this place where I had looked at everything in my life that I could actually consciously remember. And still I was acting in ways that I didn't know why I was doing that. Like I was still having all this like response out of like intense fear that didn't seem based off of anything that I had wrote down. Could that have been ancestral?
It could have, but it's more likely that that's from suppressed traumas.
Interesting.
People are really not conscious of the traumas that they experienced and the adaptive strategies that they have taken on to deal with those traumas. Especially when it comes to protector aspects that are saboteurs, right? It's not until you really talk to those aspects to figure out what it is that they're doing and when they originated. It's almost like most people don't have the capacity or the understanding yet to take an entire aspect of self out and examine it externally so as to get those types of answers. I can promise you that if I would have been around you at that time and had you do parts work with the aspect of you that is engaged in those behaviors, there would have been a very straightforward story. This is why I do it. This is what I get out of it. This is what I'm afraid is going to happen if I don't do it. And this is when I started this. It would have been a very coherent message. It's just the contents there get suppressed, denied, and disowned and rejected and into the subconscious.